Cool.
So welcome everybody to our Lunch and Learn. I am joining from Edmonton, Alberta, the Indigenous land in Treaty 6 territory. This land is occupied, traveled, and cared for by Indigenous people since time immemorial and is traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Din, and Nakota Sioux. My name is Cindy Sim, and I am the CEO and founder of Team CarePal. We support family caregivers throughout their journey through technology, community, and education. Family caregivers make up this country's largest group of healthcare providers, and yet they are unrecognized, unpaid, and more often than not, unsupported. So Team CarePal went on a mission to reduce caregiver burnout, and we built an incredible app that has an all-in-one management solution for caregivers and their families to come together to care for their loved one. Our app offers a hub for communicating, scheduling, delegating, and tracking all aspects of care while providing customized resources to support the caregiver's journey. We connect families with navigators across the country based on their location inside the app to help them navigate their caregiving journey and our very, very complex healthcare system. But one of the other things that we love to do is educate families on things that they might want to know about. And today we are doing just that. So everyone welcome Clark Hoofnagels. I hope I said that right.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah,
the
you're good.
CEO and founder of Catch, and they are on a mission to protect older adults from cyber scams. In fact, in 2022, over $8 billion was stolen from Americans through these types of scams. So Catch is working tirelessly to bring that number down to zero. In fact, I would like to kind of know, was the attack on Facebook this morning, was that a cyber attack? What was that? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know if we'll know yet, unfortunately. It'll take a little bit of time for the dust to settle. And a lot of times companies won't give you the true picture, which is a
Right.
little bit of the problem. There's no like standardized reporting or anything like that.
Well, anyways, welcome,
Yeah.
Clark. If you want to introduce yourself and get started, I am really excited because I do not know enough about this. My parents are also aging. I have young adult children, and this is something I just feel very strongly that we all need to learn more and more about so that we can protect ourselves and our vulnerable seniors. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Cindy. So yeah, as you said, I'm Clark, CEO of Catch, and really on this mission to around digital protection and cybersecurity, protecting people. And it kind of started down this journey after a family scam experience, around $27,000 lost, and just kind of a terrible event emotionally, financially, and really wanted to see if there was something we can do to help protect people. And so what's interesting, as Cindy and I kind of were talking about caregiving and fraud and scams, is that there's this really great intersection and way that caregivers can be involved. And so that's what we're kind of gonna do high level on scams themselves, and then bring it into the caregiving context. And so here we go. This is a short agenda. Don't get overwhelmed. There's lots here, but we'll move through it. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Don't be shy. This is a topic, scams and cybersecurity is a topic where we come at it from all different places and learnings and perspectives. So questions are really important to improve all of our learnings, myself included. So that's really important, but we'll kind of take it from the top and go through it. So as Cindy mentioned, scams are a big and growing problem in the US, but the same is true with Canada. And you can see really this dramatic increase as we kind of entered COVID. 2023 is not looking any better. And there's really a few tailwinds that cyber scammers have, that are kind of propelling this. We're doing a lot more online. Scammers are getting really good at operationalizing their efforts, and we have AI, and which is basically an incredible way to like personalize and target people. All of those things are kind of these tailwinds which are pushing these numbers up and up and up. And the reason that we talk about older adults, it's not actually because they're targeted, or it's not because they're victims more. It's a little bit of, it's a myth that, and kind of like something that we tell ourselves, oh, older adults are less familiar with technology. That's not actually as much the case anymore. There was some studies recently that Gen Z is actually the most scam generation, but they're often targeted for much smaller amounts. So why would scammers spend so much time targeting older adults? Well, because they have a lot of money. They're not necessarily a lot, but they certainly have more than a college kid, right? They have home equity, they have a credit and credit scores, stuff like that younger adults don't have. And so that makes them a big target. And then the second is loneliness. Aging in place is great, but it does lead people to be by themselves more often. And that desire for relationship can bring people into scams. And so this all kind of comes together to create a little bit of the issue that we have. And I'm very interested because the Canadian Anti-Fraud Agency is releasing numbers soon for their 2023 report. So we'll hopefully get to update that soon and see where we are now. But it is a big and growing problem, and there's not really anything at a societal level that's kind of happening. Before we kind of dive into the issue, I do want to talk a little bit about why this cycle happens as much. And one of the reasons is this victim blaming. And it's something that, is certainly, as I started this work, that I also did, and it's taken some time to unlearn. But there's this victim blaming culture because we believe that scams are in that person's control. They made the mistake. And when you sit in kind of the armchair, armchair quarterback it, you're like, oh, I would have made that mistake. And so therefore it is that person's fault. Whether or not that's true, what that does is it reduces people's incentive to speak and report and discuss scams. So this kind of number of like only 1 in 10 people are reporting. We don't even know the size of the problem. And that's because, in large part, because of this shame that people feel around being scammed. And one of the really interesting pieces is that Kathy Stokes from the ARP has their Fraud Watch group, had a great stat on a podcast recently where people are 80% less likely to fall victim to a scam if they've been made aware of the scam in advance. So we are really doing ourselves a disservice as a society by not talking about scams and supporting each other when scams happen. This all kind of compounds in the caregiving context because many older adults fear losing their independence, right? If I fall victim to a scam, no one is going to take away my car keys or my bank account, right? My kids are still going to love me. They're 4 and 6, so they're not making any decisions on my behalf. But that's not true as you age, where people start to question your abilities and bring in a whole bunch of other family dynamics that people are worried about, which makes them even less likely to report and talk about these issues. So kind of pulling back to this, like, who are the scammers? And this is another myth that we kind of have in society, is that scammers are these group of people that it's a kid in their parents' basement who is trying to get your money. And that's really not it. These are multi-million-dollar organizations that are full businesses. They have training programs. They have software and technology to do this. This is a very well-oiled machine, and they're around the world. In many cases, they're even state-sponsored. So, we need to provide a little bit of grace to the victims, because it's not just because of the professionalism that's happening here. It really is very large organizations that are doing that, and that's important context to have as you think about the scams that we're engaging with. Now, how do scammers target you? The TLDR of this slide is everywhere. If you have a mode of communication where someone can either fake or get to you without kind of your consent, scammers will be there trying to get to you. And we have here of the reports and dollars lost. So you can see that they're different by communication channels, but the point is you're not seeing zeros anywhere here, right? Anywhere that we are interacting digitally and even in person, scams are happening. So now we're going to get into I'm going to say some really obvious things, but it's important. If you're a teacher, there's this kind of concept of backwards planning. When you're thinking about how to protect yourself, you really want to start with like, what's the goal? What's the incentive for the scammer? And then work backwards from there. So the first is that scammers are ultimately doing it for the money, right? They're not in it for the love of the game. They're not doing it because it's their passion. They do it because they want money. And there's really three different approaches to this. They either convince you to send them the money yourself. They will either trick you into giving away your personal information, where they will then get the money from you directly, or they make you complicit in it by like hacking your email account and then you sending the link to other people. And so there's kind of these three approaches, and the goal is money, and they're either getting the money directly or using your personal information to do that. And that's why safeguarding your personal information is so important in these scenarios. With AI, it kind of lets them do more with that personal information. Now, this is a slide I love the most because every scam follows these three steps. The first is that they always bring down your guard. How do they bring down your guard? By pretending to be someone that they're not. That's always the thing they do. Oh, this is Amazon. I'm calling about your package. It's not really Amazon. Oh, I'm a romantic interest, but they're not actually a romantic interest. I'm the RCMP and I'm calling about jail time. No matter how the scam begins, they have to make you believe that they are who they say they are. If you don't believe who they are, who they say they are, the scam doesn't it stops there. And so there's a really important piece here around being very skeptical of any incoming communication. And it's a very sad reality of the world we live in. I grew up in the area of home phones. I was trained, hi, pick up the phone. This is Clark speaking. The person on the other end is someone that you respect and trust generally. And that's just not the case anymore. We need to flip it completely. You can't trust the person on the other end until proven otherwise. The second step in this is that they create a sense of urgency. Now, the sense of urgency is a common sales tactic, right? You have 24 hours, Black Friday, make the purchase. It's not new. It's just that it's employed a little bit differently with scammers, right? You need to act very quickly, or this really good thing or this really, really bad thing are going to happen, right? In the grandparent scam, someone is going to go to jail. There's an urgency. You need to act now, or this bad thing will happen. And what that sense of urgency does is it forces a quick decision. It forces you out of your traditional kind of framework of how you would make decisions, how you would think about problems, and move very quickly. There was a really great article in The Cut, and it's a newsletter. A lady talks about her scam experience. She took out $50,000 and put it in a shoebox without speaking to her husband about it. You can imagine that she never in her whole life would make a decision with $50,000 without consulting loved ones in her life. I mean, I haven't. I don't make a $20 decision without chatting with my wife about it. So how did they do that? Well, step one and step two, they forced that quick decision. And that's really the kind of the last piece of the puzzle. They need to take you out of your traditional how you think about this, how you make decisions into this like sense where you just need to make the decision right now. And there's kind of like these 2 points at the bottom is that you don't get a chance to think critically and you don't get that outside perspective. And those are really 2 important pieces. If you can put down the phone, if you can step away from the keyboard, if you can do whatever to do these 2 pieces, call somebody, take a breath, wait a day, like whatever it is, that typically will help you to avoid the situation. So these are 4 common scams. These are the ones that I like to talk about most because they typically have the highest dollars lost. And each of these, the 3 bullets, align with the first bullet is how they bring your guard down. The second is how they create urgency, and then how they force that quick decision. The 2 that I'd focus on is the grandchild scam and the romance scam, because what's interesting is that the time horizons for those 3 sections are very different. In a grandchild scam, it works where you kind of get a call in the middle of the night. They present themselves as a family member. This happened to a friend of mine who fell victim to the scam, and they were used the child's pet name, like the nickname, and Nana, the name of the grandmother. They knew information to build that authority. That's how they showed that they were trustworthy. Then it was a DUI accident. So they created this urgency. Your grandchild was in an accident. They have a DUI. They're going to go to jail if you don't act. There's that urgency. And then the quick decision along with that to say, like, you need to be acting now. Go take an action. Go take out the money. So those 3 pieces together. Now the romance scam is a little bit different. You meet the person, a romantic interest. You meet them in any way that you might meet someone romantically, a dating website, Facebook, whatever it might be. And they build kind of that authority over time with you. They build that trust by developing a relationship. And then some point later, they create urgency. Maybe months later, weeks later, years later, they create urgency by saying that there's some kind of personal event, health event, travel expense, whatever it might be. And something bad is going to happen if you don't take action. And then your quick decision, you need to quickly provide money to get them out. So kind of 2 different examples, but very different time horizons, all following the same pattern. I'll send around the deck after. I won't go into it, but there's 3 examples here, just YouTube videos that show the power of AI. Deep fakes, people might have seen these before. The purpose of this is really just to communicate this level of personalization. All this information that we've put out about ourselves online can be gathered, scraped, pulled together, and used against us, and in really compelling ways. And AI is really leveraging this in a way that people have never been able to do before. Humans have been able to do it, but it's very manually. Now they're able to do it at scale. You can see that, like, I used to be in sales, and you can see this with sales technology, where it'll go write 1,000 personalized emails to go target people. That's a fairly benign purpose, but there are versions of AI being used for less good. So now I want to talk a little bit about speaking to your loved ones about scams, and I think there's some kind of like just great practices that we can all kind of employ to kind of break this cycle. One is that just regularly discussing scams. As mentioned, the people are 80% less likely to fall victim to a scam if they've heard about that scam before. So just the fact of you talking about a new scam that you've seen or your experience really helps people to understand and identify scams as they're happening. The second is that you want to share kind of like how you deal with scams. In the caregiving context, this is important. Because we're all coming at different levels, especially intergenerationally, about how we think about scams. So sharing how you deal with scams, how you think about it. I do this with my parents and my grandparents, and I'm not with my kids because they're too young, but like I will in the future, because we're all coming at it from different ways. We all see different things. Different things are red flags. And so kind of aligning on how we all think about it, how we all deal with it is really important. The third is creating those open lines of communication. In our experience, we've seen a lot of scams become worse because people aren't willing to talk. They engage in the scam, they're in a situation that they're uncomfortable with, but because they don't have those open lines of communication, the scam goes on far longer than it should. One of the things is that if you are a victim of a scam, you're retargeted. And so if you have those lines of communication, you might be able to get out or avoid the next one. And there's a big difference between losing $1,000 and $10,000. And so those open lines of communication were like, I made a mistake, or something happened to me, can you help me? That really provides space to make a bad situation not a terrible situation. Removing the victim shaming language, it kind of talked about a little bit earlier. And then the last one, always, trying to treat adults like adults, I think is always like an important one. I think about some of the best communicators that we have, like a science communicator like Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like, even though he knows a lot more than me, I don't feel dumb when he talks to me about science, even though he's way smarter than me in the field of science. And I think we can also, it's something like, as a former teacher, I try and put into my work, where the best relationship I had with kids was when I was able to speak to them as adults, but communicate it in a way that helped them. And so I think bringing that, as we kind of talk about scams with our loved ones, is a really important piece. All right, so now getting into a bit more tactical in terms of how you can help protect your loved ones from scams. One thing that we've done as a family is a secret word to confirm your identity. Home security often does this. So if you trip up your alarm, the person will call you, hey, is this so-and-so, and you give a word. This a lot of times people will do this. This is kind of from the parenting playbook, where you have a word to confirm that this is the person that's coming to pick you up, or at least we did as kids. And so this is kind of like a great way. If you don't have a lot of trust in the communication, it's a great way to kind of verify, a very lo-fi way to verify. The second is around checking in regularly with your loved ones. As mentioned kind of at the beginning, loneliness is a big driver in scams. And so checking in regularly with people that you love, which can be hard in all of our busy schedules, but is a way to help. One of the ways that my family avoided a scam is my mom and my grandmother lived beside each other, and my mom actually walked in on a scam in progress. That happened because she's checking in on her. And so that's like that it's coincidence, but like if you check in regularly enough, that would happen. And so it's a really great way to again, like a very lo-fi, low-cost way to help avoid some of this stuff. 3 and 4, I think there's some really like clear things we can do which I'll talk about next, in terms of like how we can avoid scams and what the indicators of scams are. That goal is always the same. And so there are indicators. It's not perfect for every situation. Scams are always evolving. But there are guidelines and indicators that we can have and we can talk about and we can put in place to help protect people. And then there is additional tools, but the thing to remember there is like no solution is perfect. These are adding, just like home security, right? Anything we do on top, we can invest in things to protect ourselves, but nothing is perfect, and we need to know that. So here's a few ways that we can avoid becoming a victim. One is education. Education is one of the easiest ways that we can avoid becoming a victim, keeping up to date on what scams, how they work, new scams that are coming out. That's a really great way. The second is removing personal information from the internet. Locking down our profiles. At least for me, when I joined Facebook, way back when, it was like everything was public. I put tons of information on there, things I would never do now. And again, why? Because all that data can be scraped. People build profiles about you, and it's used for not great things. It's just not the world or the internet we grew up in. And so removing and locking down that, asking people to take down your information, all that, there's like data brokerages and stuff like that you can ask to remove your information from. That is a really practical way to prevent scams. The third, which is this kind of sad reality, is just being skeptical of all incoming communication. You are not who you say you are until proven otherwise. I have definitely hung up on my bank before, and I called them back on a different line when I know who it is, and they probably did it respectfully, but it's probably quite frustrating for them. But like ultimately, it's the right practice in terms of phone spoofing and lots of different things like that. It's just we need to be cautious about that incoming communication. Hovering over links and attachments, clicking a bad link that takes you to a website that looks exactly like the one that you think you're going to. You really want to make sure that where you're clicking on the internet is where you want to go, and you need to trust where the sender is, or the sender is sending you. So doing a bit of due diligence in terms of where you're clicking is really important. The number 5 is actually is less applicable now because of AI, right? It's easier to proofread and have that sort of stuff. It was kind of more of a identifier in the past, but it's still somewhat true where there is variations, names, any discrepancies that you can find in communication is typically an indicator of scam. And then the 6th is multi-factor authentication. In terms of getting into your accounts, this is probably the best thing that we can do. Create those secure passwords and set up multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication just means hey, if I go to log in, I have my username, I have my password, and then it sends me a code that I need to log in. It's just an additional piece that is work. And scammers aren't about doing work. They're trying to get the most money for the least amount of effort. So the more barriers that you can put in their place, the less likely you are to be a target. All right, some indicators that you are in the process of being scammed. This is probably the hardest thing to do because in the moment, their job is to create that urgency, to create that authority where it brings down all of your guards. If you can do this, you are amazing. So do your best, but it is a really hard thing to do. I will certainly call that out in the beginning. But is this call from out of the blue, right? Why is your bank calling you on this random Wednesday? So it doesn't mean that they're not calling you, but it's just something to be mindful of. Why is this person reaching out? Does this make sense? Being a little bit critical about any call that's out of the blue. If they request money, that's a very large red flag, especially if it's an unusual payment option like crypto or gift cards, anything like that. Those are very big red flags. That urgency, right? If there's a very clear deadline, immediately for me, my flags go up. Oh, this doesn't really make sense, right? We have due process in this country. You're not going to go to jail in 3 hours if you don't send money. That's not how our justice system works, thankfully. For the won't meet on cameras is typically more for romance scams, but also applies in grandchild scams, things like that, where you just can't seem to get in front of this person is a bit of a red flag. Um, the next one is like they don't ask or they tell you not to speak with anybody. Also a very big red flag, right? There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to talk to your loved one or get a second opinion, right? If you were any reasonable salesperson, if they were selling you something honest and true, would be happy for you to talk to other people and get your family on board. If they're not, that's a red flag. And then the last one is if they're really requesting any personal information, but those multi-factor authentication codes are a big one, because that's typically a blocker. It's much harder to get those than a password. And so if they're asking for that, that's a big red flag. I'll send this out with the deck. I'd encourage you to take a watch of Debbie's story. It was really, really eye-opening for me, as I hadn't been in a situation like that, but of someone's story. It's a very she's a compelling storyteller and is really open and honest about her experience, which is really, really wonderful. But it is worth a watch if you have I think it's about 5 minutes. The next thing I'll just kind of briefly talk about, but a lot of the impersonation scams, there's other ways you can confirm that authority. That's just an important piece. If it's the CRA, if it's the local police, it's the RCMP, the banks, whatever it is that's trying to reach you, there are ways to like confirm that. And I would encourage you to do that in a different way that they're calling you. Like they might say, oh, you can call me back on this number. Like, no, go find a different way to get that number. Or go into the branch or speak with someone in a different way that from how they reached you. And then this last one, what to do if you've been scammed, is kind of like just a helpful piece. The first thing, the number 1 and 2, you really want to kind of do at the same time. It might depend on what the scam is and what's happened, but the first one is really like changing any passwords. If you were compromised from a PII perspective or an account perspective, changing those is, if you're able to, is like the best and easiest way to like prevent people from getting in. Scammers often though are now, if they take over an account, they will then change the passwords and then you need to contact the bank or investment or your credit card or whatever it might be. So sometimes you can't do one and you just have to go right to 2. But 2 here is really like contact your bank, your credit card, brokerage accounts, whatever it might be, to like make sure that you kind of stop it where it is. That's like the best thing. That kind of stops the bleeding. And then from there, you can kind of take the report, and the time between 2 and 3 is like typically less urgent, but 1 and 2 are the most urgent thing that you want to do definitely right away. 3, so for 3, reporting the scam, there's really like 2 places to report: the Anti-Fraud Center, which is a part of the RCMP. So that's like one place. They kind of put together a lot of stats and help understand like scam trends, and it's important to report there for that purpose. But then your local police are typically the ones that are going to be following up and helping you. That being said, like the sad reality is, if you've lost money, you're probably never getting it back. It's just stuff goes overseas. It's not typically the person next door. And so for that, you kind of need to accept the loss. There's lots of people that'll tell you they can get your money back. That is almost a scam in and of itself. So yeah, kind of a little bit of a sad reality there, but that's where you would report. The spreading awareness is a step forward, letting people know that can be a really hard part. There's a lot of ego and difficulty in doing that. But it's, an important piece, great part of the healing process. And then 5 is really watching out for those follow-up scams. Once you have been a victim once, you will definitely be retargeted. Scammers share and sell this information all the time. And so it's important to really watch out for those follow-ups and be ultra skeptical in the future. I have some resources that with like the right links, which I can share out after, if in terms of like just getting your head around and thinking further about this topic, and then have some questions that I'd love to think about. But that's really the end of the presentation. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take it.
Thank you, Clark, so much for that. I do have a question. You mentioned staying up to date on scams. Is there like an online site that you could search to see if what you're involved in is a scam? Like if you have concerns or if you just want to get more knowledgeable about like the most popular scams out there, like is there a go-to place?
Yeah, not really. For Canadians, it would be the Anti-Fraud Center would be the best place that I would recommend. They're kind of the government agency that's really keeping up to date on all this reporting, and they're trying to put out stuff very regularly. It's not the most digestible source in my opinion, but it is the place that I would start. We're trying to do that a little bit. We're kind of realizing that education and these new scams are really a place that we have to play. So we're trying to do that as well. But certainly from a government perspective, that the anti-fraud agency would be the best place to start for people.
Okay. It sounds like communication is a really important tool in all of this, and showing up with your own vulnerabilities around the subject as well, regardless of your age and experience with technology. Because I know I worry a lot about being scammed, you know, because I'm involved in the digital world quite often. And yeah, you know, again, for like my parents too, like, you know, I could see that victim shaming being, you know, a thing. Like, you know, if my loved ones were to come and be like, oh my goodness, I lost $50,000, I'd be like, what did you click on? You know, like
Yeah.
you would just kind of naturally go there. But that's not, you know, how it should be, because like I probably would have clicked on the same thing, let's be honest, you know, like so
Mhm.
we really have to remove that victimizing and, you know, bring forth our own vulnerability. And like you said, just share, you know, our experiences, you know, and what's going on out there. When my husband, when I was talking to him about that AI grandparent scam, when we were going through your slides yesterday, he was like, we need a safe word. Like we gotta talk to the kids, you know? And so I love that you have a secret word to confirm the identity, because you're right, you know, with AI coming up, I mean, they can, you know, pose as your own voice. Like they could really duplicate your own voice and start, you know, calling you, pretending to be your child, right? So I think, you know, having those conversations as a family with your grandparents and your kids, you know, throughout, and having that safe word or, you know, discussion around that would be really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, even one of the things I like I mentioned, when I was a kid, I would always answer the phone like, "Hello, this is Clark speaking." Like, you know, you do that in it was politeness. It's what you did. Is like they say you shouldn't even do that anymore because they can put these sound bites together and make it sound like you. So yeah, it's really important to have these kind of like other avenues of where you confirm identity and that sort of thing. And the other thing, going back to to the victim shaming, one of the pieces that's like it's very hard even for me is like you see a lot of scams and that gives you this false sense of confidence, right? Oh, I got one from Costco, like a text or well, Costco, and I'm not a Costco member. I'm like, oh, it's such a terrible attempt at a scam, right? And like that's what our first thought is. But scams are all about volume. It's a volume game, and it's about hitting the right person at the right time with the right message. So yeah, maybe it wasn't for this, like this scam wasn't for me. I didn't click on it, but you know, a job search scam could be another one, right? Oh, I was waiting to hear back from a job, right? That gets much closer to me at this time. So it's important to not have this false sense of confidence that I'm able to identify all the scams, because we're not. It really is. We're all able to fall victim. It's just at the right time, at the right scam, at the right moment, with the right information that brings down our guard very quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had like the Canada Post or whoever, at the border where they're like, we have a package for you. You owe us money, and I'm like,
Mhm.
inflation. I haven't been able to shop online for like a year. That's not me, but had that have come during, COVID, I probably, because everybody shopped online, right? So that timing really comes into play too. No, that completely makes sense. Anyone else have witnessed a scam or heard of a scam? Like what's going on out there? Darlene,
Yeah.
share.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's becoming more and more prevalent. Here's one that we got a text yesterday from our daughter, who has her own business. She has her clients all pay her by direct deposit, never had a problem. She's selling an iPad. And the guy comes to pick it up. He said, "Yeah." And she, again, her clients, they pay. She always checks, but so she's doing a separate thing, and so the guy picks up the product, and then she goes to check later, and of course there's no deposit, and of course he was using a burner phone. The website's down.
Mhm.
It's done. Like he's gone, and so is her iPad pad. And so it's not, what concerns me is that this is happening across all age groups now. It's not just, to us as, older adults, and because we may have more finances than some people. It's happened to family members, and the things about like even banks. So she called her bank yesterday, and they couldn't help her at all. So, but we have to do as much reporting as possible so that it gets recorded. It becomes a problem. We recently just discontinued our home phone for exactly the reason that you said, Clark. Because I always answer the phone, "Hello, Darlene speaking." I haven't done that for years now, but it was just like we would pick up the phone, and we got to the point where we never even said hello until someone said hello first. Because then it was concerned, okay, well, if I say hello, then they already have my voice recording.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like it's sad that we are in this kind of this fear. That's the part that's so sad, is that we're living in this state of fear about all these things that could happen. So the more we can do to be aware, to protect each other and everyone around us, the better, because it's becoming harder and harder to manage.
Yeah.
What? Well
Absolutely.
said, Darlene. Well said. Yeah, and I'd love to share some, pieces from Clark and Team Care Pal app under, scam information, for the resources for our families as well. But you're absolutely right, Darlene.
Yeah.
Is there any
Yeah.
other
It's just,
questions? Oh, go ahead.
oh no, just the sad reality, I think, of where we're at, where we're just like not going to be able to trust the communication that we once did, and we're just going to have to be very skeptical.
Well, and again, which is harder and harder for, especially for, as we get older, because trust is it's the first thing in connection, in community. And, if you can't trust, somebody that's talking to you, or somebody new that you're meeting, and it's like, yeah, somehow it just makes our whole world a little bit more difficult. But learning what you taught us today, and just being more and more aware, and again, all the things that they're showing, like on Marketplace and W5, and there's more and more information coming out to help keep us informed. So this is very timely, and thank you, Clark, for everything you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we're happy to do it, so if there's other people who are interested, other organizations, we're happy to do it. We really believe that education, we have three pillars to our business, but education and then technology and support. And we really believe that education is a huge component here.
And that was actually going to be my question, of exactly what you do at Catch. Because I will say, like Darlene was saying, it feels like it's become more and more. But for a short period, like I have elderly parents and an elderly mother-in-law, and they've all been taken in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
some of it was just personal information, some of it was money. But I've noticed in the last little while they have been educated. So somebody is doing a good job. I mean, we felt like we were backtracking for a while, trying to catch up with all the scams and keep them informed and kind of say, oh goodness, like don't give this information. And here's some possible scenarios. If my nephew calls, he's probably the most likely one they're going to target. And he's probably going to be saying he's got to go to jail and whatever. And trying to give our parents like scenarios of what to expect. But in the last little while, I've had both my parents and my mother-in-law give me scenarios of where somebody called, and like my mother-in-law, like you said, Darlene, she wouldn't even say hello. She was like, I knew I shouldn't say hello till they say hello. And it was like, okay, somebody's doing a good job educating because they're catching up and they're catching on. And my mother played along with somebody who told her she was coming, and mom gets a real kick out of it. She said they were coming and they were, wondering if my address had changed and wanted to confirm where my bank was that I usually use because they were coming with a prize. And mom said, oh, that's great. She said, can I have my family there? She said, I've got two sons who are RCMP officers. They'll be there to take care of me. And she said, click, they hung up. And I was like, good for you, mom. Like she really played along with it. So I said, somebody is giving the information, and the education is happening. Yeah.
That's great.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead,
Hello.
Fawn.
Yes. Can you suggest of a way to think of how to come back with family when they're labeling you as you have a trust issues? Because I have gotten scammed from my car mechanics. They hold on to a sport cars and they promise to get it done, but hold on to it for over 3 weeks. And we keep coming back to look at the car to see if it's done. And one time the car's not in the shop. And by the time we got it back, we noticed that the mileage was quite many miles used. So they hold on to it so to keep on using it. And then another one was I am in the church support group for divorce and separation right now. And after 6 months of being in the same group, a male friend would insist that I loan him $36,000 because it's very urgent. And knowing that I don't have a job, and he said, do you have a house? And how do you pay for this? I'll pay you for that. I thought, was he just caring? But when he insists in a lot of urgency, he's still in the same group, but I keep telling him I don't have the money. And I still am very shaky that this support group person, that he's also going through a divorce, I suppose. He's in California and I'm in another part of the United States. But I do have this issue of trusting. And I have been told by my male brother and female sister that you have trust issues repeatedly, and I don't know what to say. And that's still angsting me with, I do, because I'm being hurt and burned, and I'm very afraid to touch something that I'm not comfortable. So any encouragement to how to think about that? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think what I would say is that you probably have trust issues for the right reason, and that is protecting you. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in right now, just have to have those kind of barriers up until proven otherwise. But I definitely, yeah, it can be hard for other people who haven't had their trust broken.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I think if there's no other questions, I know we are creeping at the end of our lunchtime and everybody's got to get back to work, but I just really want to thank you all, Joy, Fawn, Darlene, Judy, who's also on John's iPad. That's my beautiful mother. I want to thank you all for being here. And yes, we will share everything from Clark with you guys and everyone else who couldn't make it today. And if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to Clark. I'm sure he would gladly, help you guys out. And, moving forward with Team Care Pals Lunch and Learns, if you guys ever have any recommendations, of questions that or topics that you want to talk about, we can bring in those professionals and we can definitely and talk about them. I mean, again, it all comes down to communication and education and talking about these things. So we are very open to doing that. So please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to us. I want to thank you all for coming, and a special thanks to Clark for spending your lunch with us and educating us. And we look forward to all the information you're going to send us. Yes, thank you all so much for coming, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.